In his confirmation hearing for the post of US Health Secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said that he was not anti-vaccine, that he supports the current childhood vaccination schedule, and he added that he's not a conspiracy theorist, which is good, because you wouldn't want someone who's any of those things coming in as Health Secretary. I mean, if they did, they'd probably do wild stuff, like, I don't know, purging all the qualified and knowledgeable members of the CDC's top advisory committee on vaccines, the ACIP, and they'd then replace them with a motley and unqualified mix of anti-vax and anti-vax light and just basically unqualified people. And you'd then push scientifically disproven statements through that committee and use it to upend government advice and practice so that it was shaped by hearsay and superstition more than it was evidence-based medicine, and all in the name of correcting alleged past biases in the face of what they insist is superior science. So, yeah, glad that didn't happen. And in other news, last week the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., purged all 17 members of the CDC's ACIP committee. These were replaced by 8 people who were held to be, well, somewhat controversial. They included people like Robert Malone, the man who spread anti-mRNA COVID vaccine content during COVID, whilst claiming to have invented the mRNA vaccines. Now, he'd actually been involved in a much earlier stage of the development of the technology, but a long way short of the central role that he was claiming for himself. I was making videos on this channel talking about all the stuff that was going on in that time, because obviously I was. And I remember when he particularly came into my view, because viral claims have been circulating around Twitter that they had edited Malone's Wikipedia entry to wipe out the references to him having invented the technology, because they didn't want you to know that, obviously. And they showed the screenshot of a Wikipedia page as it was before, gushing all about his centrality to it, and the screenshot afterwards, with all of that removed, so that seemed to back up his claim. Well, the great thing about Wikipedia is that all the edits are recorded and publicly available, so I just went to have a look and see what had happened. 2 days before, a user with the name of Malone's wife had edited his entry to insert the passage, giving him all that glowing credit. That was then correctly removed by a Wikipedia editor because it seemed to obviously break the rules against people editing their own pages. And that was the edit that then Malone was claiming was they, the shadowy elites, trying to keep the truth from you. I rather figured that episode alone probably told you everything you needed to know about Robert Malone and his increasingly far-reaching claims about vaccine harms and other things. Except now you also have to add another part to that Wikipedia page, that he is a member of the highest level advisory group on vaccines for the US government. Because of course he is. Alongside others with just as creative a history, just not necessarily ones that I'd previously come across. Republican Senator Bill Cassidy, who had stifled his doubts about RFK Jr. to vote for him in his confirmation hearing, he came out against the revamped committee, calling for it to be reconsidered. He posted on Twitter that many of the new members, quote, do not have significant experience studying microbiology, epidemiology, or immunology. In particular, some lack experience studying new technologies, such as mRNA vaccines, and may even have a preconceived bias against them. The meeting should be delayed until the panel is fully staffed, with more robust and balanced representation, he said. We'll have very 2024 of him. Now, why does it matter? Well, if ACIP recommends a vaccine, then health insurers have to cover it. Also, ACIP recommendations feed into the vaccines given to children via the Vaccines for Children programme. So anyway, the first meeting of the committee took place this week. On the agenda was influenza vaccines, which is fairly normal, but added to that discussion was to be a presentation regarding thimerosal in vaccines. This presentation was not to be given by a career vaccine scientist or anyone else who might have actual expertise in the area. No, instead, long-time anti-vax activist Lynn Redwood gave a presentation. She had been affiliated years ago with RFK Jr.'s own anti-vax group. Her slides were posted, and it was noted they included a reference to a study that doesn't exist, which is not a great start. Now, where did all this come from? Well, it came from back in the days, early in the century, when RFK Jr. published an article in Rolling Stone where he made the claim that vaccines containing thimerosal had been the cause of an autism epidemic. Also, he said the CDC had tried to cover up the evidence, which even attracted a name, the Simpson-Wood conspiracy theory. The world had enough evidence even then to know that thimerosal was not causing autism. And in any case, thimerosal stopped being added to most vaccines long ago. It remains in a bare minority of shots and only in low or trace amounts. Dr. Peter Hotez of the Center for Vaccine Development in Texas told CNN this: "I'm worried that putting thimerosal on the agenda when it is no longer used in most pediatric vaccines serves no purpose other than to erode trust in our national vaccine and immunization programs. This has been a consistent pursuit by Mr. Kennedy and his associates." One of the panel members dissented from the panel's take, Dr. Cody Meissner, a professor of pediatrics who's considered to be the most qualified member of the new committee. He said this: "The risk from influenza is so much greater than the non-existent risk, as far as we know, from thimerosal." One of the CDC's leading vaccine experts, Fiona Havers, resigned in protest at recent events. She said that the CDC's vaccine processes have been corrupted in a way I haven't seen before. She told the New York Times, "If it isn't stopped and some of this isn't reversed, like immediately, a lot of Americans are going to die as a result of vaccine-preventable diseases." So this is an interesting situation, and yes, the word interesting is doing quite a lot of work in that sentence. If you have a knowledgeable and expert medical health community, and you suddenly have a poisoning of the institutions that are supposed to give definitive advice, changing that with actual pseudoscience and misinformation, well, you could anticipate certain responses. The first thing I would think would happen would be the setting up of shadow institutions to try to create some sort of advice that still reflects the state of reliable current scientific literature. And while it's early days, so it seems, the Washington Post reported that the various professional medical societies, pharmacists, state health officials, and vaccine manufacturers, as well as a newly created advocacy group, are organising to try to preserve access for vaccines in spite of what happens under RFK Jr. Options being discussed include ordering vaccines directly from manufacturers, giving greater weight to vaccine advice from medical associations than to that from the US government. Now, whether they will be able to persuade health insurers to continue to cover vaccine shots if they have been removed from CDC guidance, that is the big question. It's certainly likely that competing advice from different sources of information will start to feed confusion into the system at all levels, and almost certainly fall into the same ideological divide on medicines that we already saw during COVID. I used to say often in my videos in that era that it was a sign of the stupidity of our age that you could predict someone's politics in the United States based on which were their favoured medications for COVID, as well as for some other things as well. As though there's a freedom-loving capitalist germs and low-down communist germs or something. Does any of this mean that the medical establishment that took the US through COVID was entirely without fault and blameless back in those days? Well, no, of course not. But it's getting very old very fast when the absence of perfection in the past is being used as the justification for out-and-out quackery, pseudoscience and grifting in the present. We've seen it, and I've discussed it here, on climate science, but ultimately people's health is really where it strikes closest to home. There is about to be a real crisis of confidence in government where it matters. And while you might think, Well, okay, that's annoying, but it'll just damage the current Trump administration. Well, more likely it will accelerate the damage to people's trust in institutions more broadly, in ways that may well endure, maybe even for decades. And of course, even more importantly, such a crisis of confidence won't just kill trust, it will almost certainly kill people as well.